This is the Reading with Rochelle podcast, where we explore history we never learned in school but wish we had. I am Rochelle Chase, and this week's book is Labor, Race, and Liberty, George Edwin Taylor and His Historic Run for the White House, and the Making of Independent Black Politics by Bruce L. Mauser. Now, George Edwin Taylor was a Democrat at a time when most Black Americans were Republicans, but he was disillusioned with both parties. So in 1904, Taylor ran for president as a member of the newly formed African American political party, the National Liberty Party. Now, there's so much more to this book than that, so today I will be discussing Labor, Race, and Liberty with my guest, Erick Nganyange, creator and host of the Iowa Civil Rights History podcast, where listeners discover Iowa's role in the advancement of civil rights. And then Erick is also an accountant and co-founder of Boys to Men Mentoring with Pete Jean-Pierre. All right, Erick, welcome to Reading with Rochelle. I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Rochelle. I'm excited about your podcast. I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, well, I'm a little intimidated by having you on my show.
Why?
You are like the expert. I always recommend everybody listen to the Iowa Civil Rights History podcast. I mean, I just think it's great. You have done such an awesome job.
Well, that shouldn't be intimidating, though.
No,
that should be a great thing. That means I'm not going to mess up your sound, audio. Everything is going to come out good.
Yeah, but it's like we were talking. If it doesn't turn out good, it's me. It's because of me.
Well, that's true. That's true. It's always about the host. A friend of mine told me that if you have a bad conversation, it's not about the guest. It's just you ask the wrong question.
Well, speaking of podcasts, though, you are coming up on your 4th year anniversary. How does that feel?
It feels real good. And in this sense, because when I started the podcast, I did not know nobody who was doing podcasts. Mm. And the other thing is, for instance, your episode, when I did your episode at that time, you already did so many sit down with a lot of people. Yeah. The comments always bring home for me is when people hear something from the guest who has been asked so many questions that, oh, I never hear this angle about her. And there was one lady say, oh, I read everything about Rochelle. I listened to a lot of stuff that she has been asked, but I never knew anything about Rochelle's life from this perspective.
Yeah.
And for me, chronologically, historic about people is very important because I'm trying to understand that too. I just want to know, how did you get here from here? Mm-hmm.
But I feel like also you let the story unfold. You know, it's not like you go into this with this preconceived idea of this is what this episode's going to be about. But you let that person tell their story and you wait and see after you've got all this information, what is the story that I have here? Is that a correct assumption?
Yes. My agenda is my guest to tell their own story.
Exactly.
Instead of me projecting, act like I know what their story is. For instance, me sitting down with Ken Nixon, I read everything about his case. I was fully prepared, but when I sat down with him, the first question I think I asked him is about him growing up in Detroit. I completely changed the direction of the conversation. I wanted him to walk everybody through, because most of us, we never been in prison for 16 years for something we did not do. So we have no idea. We don't know that experience. So I was more interested, not his lawyer, not the judge, nobody. You tell me how that experience felt like. And how do you do that and coming out, still have faith with the criminal justice system?
Well, let's take a step back. I gave a little intro about your podcast, but why don't you tell people who may not be familiar with it about your podcast and why they should listen to it?
The Iowa Civil Rights History podcast. Number one, you should listen to it because Rochelle say I'm the best. that should tell you everything. The Iowa Civil Rights History podcast. Like you say, I'm going into the 4th year anniversary. I came across the idea of doing a podcast because, number one, I'm a history lover. I love history. And I started finding out some things about the Iowa history, and most important, regarding the civil rights. And I was so impressed, and I'm still impressed with Alexander Clark. When I came across his story, his daughter. And like I said before, I start talking to other people who from Iowa. Hey, and the thing about this guy is he seems like a very stand-up guy. And he seems like he has done some miracle thing in the 19th century. People did not know. And there's a part of me, I was a little bit disappointed. Oh man, how can you not know this much history of just one person? The more I start reading, more and more story I'm finding out. And I was like, oh wow. Well, I want everybody to know about these guys. And then, fun enough, I went on a podcast on my phone and looked for Iowa civil rights. There was nothing. I was like, wow, how possible that nobody in the state of Iowa is talking about these things? Talking to a friend of mine, expressed my disappointment to him. And he said, man, I can't believe it. Nobody stepped up to the plate and shared these stories. And he looked at me, it's like, what are you waiting for? Mm. And the whole idea of the podcast is to highlight all untold stories of the people who lived in Iowa and did great things to advance the civil rights. These are the people, some people know them, but majority of people don't know them. And once I did the first episode, nonstop, and it's like the topics keep coming. So people will let me know, say, have you ever heard about this? Have you ever heard about this? The only downfall is I don't like people to think I'm an expert. I'm not. I talk to experts about the topics. I'm just interested about those things. Yeah, so that's the long, short version of what the podcast is about.
All right. Well, this has been great. Let me switch gears here for a moment. When you joined the Uniting Through History book club, and we've read a lot of books, you've been like one of the original, I think maybe not the original, but early members, let's just say. But when we came to this book, the one we're talking about today, For Labor, Race, and Liberty, George Edwin Taylor, his historical run for the White House and the making of independent Black politics. That's quite a mouthful, by Bruce L. Mauser. When I mentioned that I'd chosen this book, you were excited to read this. You were excited. Why were you excited about this book?
Incredible story. I did not know anything about Mr. Taylor until you put that book up to read. And another thing I just find out about all these guys and Black women in 19th century, there's so many of these stories about them doing some of the most incredible things. You just need to go there and find it. It's like there's so many of them because this is the same generation of Alexander Clark, Frederick Douglass, all these guys is in that era. So when people doing extraordinary things like George Taylor, I just want to learn everything about him. It's not just him being the first Black person to run for president, but I want to know everything from his birth. Because people don't just pop up and run for president at that time, especially as Black men. There's a lot of more history behind it. So you need to study their whole life to understand how did they get there. So that's one thing. And plus, I love history. I love studying history about a couple different people, and this one was right there on my alley for me. So, yeah, this was a great pick, Rochelle. Yeah. I mean, most of the book you pick is the great pick, but this one was right up there for me.
And when you talk about you wanted to know his life, I like that the author started at the beginning, but there were like surprising things.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, I couldn't believe at 4 years old, he's orphaned.
Yeah.
And he's on his own.
Yeah.
He is living alone, making a living, as the author calls him, a waif. Mm-hmm. But he actually survives. Oh, yeah. He gets jobs. That was just fascinating to me.
And did you feel like, and I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit
that's right.
too, and that's the beauty of book discussion. It's like you weaving all over the places. And also, I felt like for him, became journalist, start newspaper. That was another crazy thing. It's like almost every prominent Black person in 19th century, they had their newspaper talking about narrative. They wanted to make sure what has been reported about them or about their race is a line of actually what's going on. So from the beginning, I felt he also gained a lot based on the place he was. He ended up connecting with that guy in Pomeroy. Yeah, early, even though the guy character was not great. And he started working as editor on that newspaper. And I think that gave him a lot of insight of what's real going on. And that was, to me, I felt like that was his first introduction to the politics.
Yeah, he didn't have the best role model, but
No.
that was the introduction. And what was interesting, I think, about that, which was different from others, was the fact that he focused more on working class. He was in labor, farmers, whereas you hear about W.B. Du Bois and all these other ones who are the top 10th, the elite, that's urban areas, the South, whereas he wasn't focused on that. And what I thought was really interesting as well is that Mauser had stated he had no Black role models in that beginning. And so he wasn't even, unlike most leaders at that time, he wasn't even focusing on like race issues.
Yep.
And so for him to be in a state that, like Iowa, is predominantly white, he's got white mentors, he's an editor of a paper, and he has this clout in labor, which again is not accepting of African Americans. So it was just interesting. His background was not the norm, if there is such a thing.
Progressively, you can see he starts seeing things, he start watching things, and then he's like, okay, let me start pivot a little bit because there's issue here. Let me start reporting this stuff. Let me start writing this stuff. And I think when there was one time the race became an issue when he started pivoting to the different candidate. I don't know if you remember that. I think that was the brother of, I can't remember the guy who was a mayor. And he refused to run for another term, and his brother was put in place. And people did not like his brother. So even his white friends, now they start coming after him. Why are you supporting this guy? Which is the game of politics. But going back, it's important to mention that he was born in 1857. His father was a slave.
His mother was not.
His mother was not. And so he was not a slave himself. Yep. And like you say, at 4 years old, his mother died. I wonder, because he did not have no relationship with his father, and his mother passed at age 4.
Right.
The author did not bring that up, and probably was not that important back then. How much did that impacted him growing up? He basically got adopted by Smith. Yeah, Smith. And it seems like Smith was adopting a lot of kids.
Right.
And he was part of that. And it seems like Smith was good role model and good father figure for him. But I did not see in the book anything about how much that affected him growing up.
No. Which, unfortunately, probably there were no records. He didn't write about it. So there's really no idea of how he felt.
Yeah, no way of knowing it. But I'm sure it did affect him. But
even being adopted by Smith, that happened later. I mean, from 4 until, I want to say he was like 10 or teens. I can't remember exactly. But Smith came later. So all that time he had been on his own and working and, making money and just trying to survive at that time.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture that.
I just can't. At 4?
Yeah.
That's just amazing. Well, let me go back to something you said, though, when you said, how his transition to writing more about race issues or Black issues. What's interesting to me has been, it seems like his personal journey has triggered these transitions, meaning, to your point, when he was working for, I think it was Frank Powell, White Beaver Powell was the first, the brother.
The Star newspaper or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other brother came. When he felt betrayed by these people, these white men that he had supported for this time, granted, he had switched to the brother because the Frank wasn't running anymore. But it almost felt like when he was betrayed, if you remember, I think he went off into kind of a little hibernation. He withdrew for a bit just to regroup. And then that's when he moved to Iowa. And then he became more on the Black side, really representing and really being concerned about Black miners, Black laborers, that working class. But I also feel like it was his personal transition of what he experienced with those people that he was campaigning for. What do you think?
I think there's a huge part of that, of his personal life. But I think when he was doing what he was supposed to be doing in La Crosse, nobody brought it up, the race issue. But I think when he started becoming defiant, started speaking out about the things that he did not like, because remember, his house got burglarized. They stole the list of the people who donated to his newspaper. And so that tells you, because now you're not aligned to what we want you to align to. So automatically you become enemy. We don't care about anything else. So you're right. The personal issues like that, but I think it's more political for him to start going against the grain. This is what we want you to focus on. We don't want to hear anything else about this. So since you don't want to do that, we're going to show you who we are. I feel like that's what we got going on even today.
Well, and I agree. But my point is, it's because he had been sheltered from that pretty much the whole time, because his beliefs did align with what was acceptable.
Yep.
It was when he then discovered that, you know what, I don't agree. I'm going to speak my mind. It's, oh, well, now it's not acceptable. And now he's now experiencing what other Black people are experiencing. So that's what I mean.
Stay in your place.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. That's why I feel like it triggered his journey of, oh, I'm being treated now like other Black people are. And so now this just got real. But to your point, it is like what's happening today.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that's when we read these books, that is the thing that sadly repeated over and over again. The same things we are fighting for, voting rights, for to be accepted, for all of these systemic issues, all of these things people were fighting for then.
Yep.
And anyway, so I totally agree.
They were talking in the book in 1800s. It's almost like the same thing going on now. It's like the interesting piece also I found out is the transition of Black people from one party to another.
Yeah.
And specifically what they said in there is what Black folks are talking about now. Mm-hmm. You are not serving our interest, so we're going to go somewhere else. The voting bloc. They were talking about that then in 1892. Yeah. He was told, wait.
Yeah.
Do you know who else was told, wait? JFK was Dr. King. Mm-hmm. And some of his own clergymen told him, wait. Do you know who was sitting on the door constantly waiting for Abraham Lincoln to make things happen? And Lincoln kept telling him, wait. So there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah, these guys were being told wait in 1800. Dr. King was being told wait in 20th century. So it's back to back. Okay, how long is the wait?
Yes, exactly.
So it looks like they were talking about reparation then.
Yes.
That's the big conversation today.
That was surprising. Now, I knew that. Yeah. But I didn't really. I mean, when I saw it from the standpoint of pensions, I didn't know at that time they were fighting for all enslaved people to get a pension and then an upfront amount and then for life.
Yeah.
But what also was interesting, how then you look at the W.B. Du Bois, the Frederick Douglass, more of the elite Blacks were like, no, we don't want this. Because first of all, we want education. We want the money to go towards education. If you just pay these, this is going to help the South. It's not going to help the things that we believe in. Mm-hmm. But I guess I was surprised that there was that specificity to it and that level of debate going on in the Black community at that time. I shouldn't have been, but it was a surprise to me.
It was another piece too. They were talking a lot about economic freedom.
Oh, yeah.
That's the conversation we're having today.
Exactly.
A lot. And I think that was also split a little bit back then as well. Some of them were talking about social issues. Mm-hmm. Some of them say, listen, we need economic freedom and all these other things going to take care of itself. Mm-hmm. Once we have money and power to make economic decisions without depending on anybody, we will be able to fix this other problem. And you see that today.
Yeah.
A lot of conversation on economics. Let's focus on economics first and then everything else. Even today, there's a lot of conversation about Black people questioning the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Say, okay, you're not serving our interest anymore. We got a problem.
Well, gosh, you brought up so many issues there, so many points with that. Let me just start with the last one. This concept or this thing of Black people not feeling like either party is listening.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's been going on. What was interesting to me in this book is I didn't realize there were so many different Black political parties at this time, besides the one that George Edwin Taylor ended up running on, that ticket. Mm-hmm. So not only that, but the fact that Black people didn't get behind him. So many didn't, that he was ridiculed, by Black people as well, that, this is not going to work. You need to get behind one of the established parties. And sure, that I could see that, but it has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So we fast forward to today. And when I was working for the Des Moines Register and I'd written a little bit about politics and it was interviewing people around the 2020 election, Black people, to say, how are you feeling? And there was a sense of apathy again. I only hear from either party when it's time to get my vote.
Yeah.
I don't hear from anything else. Nobody is really addressing Black people's needs. I don't even know if I'm going to vote this year, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
My point is, it's the same sentiment that was going on then. But what I've always wondered is why there has not been a movement to start a party. I know it's not practical. I know, in just like Taylor
it is
knew,
practical.
No, but I mean practical from the standpoint of it's not going to maybe instantly.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to take time.
Yeah.
But these other parties took time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've just wondered why there hasn't been the momentum, since I'm hearing from so many people in the community that are totally disillusioned with both parties. Why is there not someone standing up and saying, you know what, here's a party and here's how it's going to be? Now, granted, it would take like I said, to get people just like in that time period to all come together and vote for this and be on the same page. But like I said, it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So I think, I'm not an expert, but this is what I think is going on.
I'm not an expert either.
So I had one guest on the podcast one time, and he also expert on the Civil War. And I asked him the question. It's like, hey, there's a lot of conversation about Civil War today. Since you do a lot of homework, what do you see? And his answer was very interesting. And I'm going to cycle back to what you're talking about. He said, no, I don't see that happen today. I'm like, why? He said, because when a Civil War happened in 1860, there was big issue on the table. And that's what split the people big time. Today, we are fighting about everything. So it's going to be very hard to say you have one group here and another group here, and we have one thing we're dealing with. Going back to what you say, I think the problem today, even in the Black community, we have so many things on the table. We are even argue amongst ourselves. So what is that bring us together beside the race itself, that we say, hey, this is the biggest problem we have right now that we need to solve. Slavery is the biggest problem right now. We want to be free. Forget about everything else. This is it. But right now, we have 20 different things that we disagree on, not just in the Black community, in the country, in the whole country. So it's, okay, me and Rochelle, we're fighting about this, and I'm fighting about this, the other person about this. There's so many different things. Is to have that one party say, this is what it is. I think that's our biggest struggle.
I agree. But I think we also saw that in these political parties in the book. I feel like what we are experiencing right now is the same thing there, from the standpoint of, you had the urban areas were focused on, okay, these are our problems. Labor, in the more rural areas, like working class. Then you have the elite Blacks that are focused on, okay, no, education and this. And you guys over here focusing on this are keeping us from doing this.
Yeah.
So I feel like we had that same thing going on then that we have now. But I do think about slavery being that was the big thing that we could rally around. Mm-hmm. I feel like even now that is true. I will agree with that it would take that one big thing for us to rally around. Because even when you look at the civil rights, like with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, there were, in a sense, yes, there were a lot of things. Yeah. But there's also the one big thing that we are getting beat and killed, and we can't go into stores. We can't live our lives. We can't earn a living. We can't take care of our family. We can't do all this. These are the serious roadblocks.
Oh, yeah.
So even though there are different leaders, people are still gravitating to these leaders around this one thing.
One thing.
So I feel like if they had not been assassinated, we would be living in a different world in some ways today. Because had people rallied around, that to me is like the closest in my, that not going way back to history that I can't really, not that I experienced that either, but it's closer to my life. I feel like that's the one time where I feel like, wow, maybe we could have rallied around something and really come together and really accomplish something. Mm-hmm. Not that we haven't, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's true. And again, to your point, Dr. King and Malcolm X, their disagreement is how to get there. But it was not about the issue, most of the issue themselves, because I think they agree on the things they were fighting for.
Right.
It's like how to get there I think is what separated them the biggest.
Yeah. And I had written an article about that, showing that at the time that they were assassinated, they were both coming together on their approaches. More similar to, they weren't as far apart as the media liked to make them believe they were. Gosh, you can say that. They weren't as far apart as the media wanted everyone to believe that their beliefs were.
Yeah, I mean, the media is always do what the media does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The angle.
The narrative, the
agenda.
angle, the agenda. Always keep that in the back of your mind. So, yeah, I mean, can we have a voting bloc or political party today? I think we can if we want to. I think we can rally behind it. Something that we can all agree on. What that is, I don't know, but I think there's possibility if we don't take down our leaders all the time because we disagree with them on one thing or two things. What's the unit you look like in the Black community to me?
The unit?
Yeah. In the Black community, I always feel the best way for, if you call Pan-Africanism or whatever, to unify is based on project. So let's say, Rochelle, you're passionate on doing podcasts, and I'm passionate on doing podcasts. We need to unify to make that happen. And I think once we start doing that slowly on the things we care about, I think that's when the unity starts. Because you start knowing people from who they are versus their political affiliation. Because I think there's so many different things that can split us, and we need to start focusing on the things that bring us together. I'm doing a mentoring program with Pete. I don't even know what his political views, but what I know, I can count on him 100% on these mentoring things. So I know for a fact that's our agenda, and that's our main focus. And we put the ego to the side, we put everything else to the side, and we don't allow anything to get in the middle of that. And personally, I feel like that's the path. We don't need to support each other on everything we do, even if we don't care about it. But if somebody's doing something, you're passionate about it, jump on it. And also, if somebody don't support us on something we do, let's not take it personal. Oh, Rochelle is hating on me. Rochelle don't want to. No, Rochelle don't care about electric cars. You want to talk about books? You might want to reach out to Rochelle. She's passionate about that. And I feel like that will be probably the best way to do it. Because since you start knowing people, understand who they are, then you can understand even why they have the certain political views. And we can start having a little bit grace on them. And I feel like most of the time we get together, the goal is great. We have great goal. We have great agenda. We're about to make it happen. And somebody's coming on Erick's ear. Hey, Rochelle is supporting Trump. You're like, what? Cloud your judgment. And now you completely forget about this goal here, which was bigger goal than everything else. And that get in the way before. Oh yeah, remember that movement they had? It's dead. And you go, how? And I learned this from other people, different race. And I think it's American mentality. We don't have permanent friends. We just have permanent interest. And that should be the focus, that this is our interest. We got a problem with our young Black boys that cannot read. Do you have a passion for that? Yes, I do. Okay, come on in. Yeah, we don't care about nothing else. If this is what you care about, come on in. Oh, but I'm felony. Can you read? Yes, I can. Come on in. We don't care about none of that. This is the goal. In the next 5 years, we're going to get these young boys to read. Period. Once we start moving that way, I give ourselves 10 years. It's going to completely flip upside down for the better. That's my opinion. But I'm just a podcaster. What do I know? We got to do something, honestly. We got to help. I mean, we got to make people like George Edwin Taylor be proud if they wake up today. Oh, okay. So you guys pick up the torch and ran with it. We don't want them to get up and say, oh, you just left that torch on the ground. And we don't have an excuse, actually, compared to what these guys went through personally, socially, economically. Today, we don't. So, yeah, I mean, George Edwin Taylor did what he had to do. We should do what we need to do.
Exactly.
I think we got different problems today. We need to figure out different solutions. And one of those solutions, for me, I feel like we just need to start having dialogue with one another, especially with the people you disagree. And it's a tough thing to do, but it's the exercise that we need to start having. It's a mental gymnastic that we need to start practicing. And eventually, It'll get better. Have you ever studied the genocide of Rwanda, 1994?
I did not.
I always go back to that, and here's why. Civil War, 1860 through 1865, it cost roughly about 1 million people, 600,000 deaths, and the other probably 400,000 injured and those type of things. Rwanda, they had a genocide in 1994, and strictly tribal genocide. In 100 days, 600,000 people got butchered with machete. The problem with that genocide was the neighbor were able to walk into their neighbor's house and butcher the whole family. These are the people who live next door to you for 20 years or some. But people harbor these feelings about their neighbors. They never had a chance to have conversation. They never had a chance to say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. They never had a chance to have open dialogue. So dislike, disappointment, resentment, it builds hate. And you let the hate build for long enough, it's going to be despair. And you're going to start just one or the other person dead. And if we don't have a dialogue as where we are going right now, oh yeah, we're going to want to have other people die. And what's the funny thing, Rochelle? Everybody hates the other political party, but nobody wants the one-party system, which is weird to me. Every time I have conversation with somebody, they say, oh yeah, all those guys on the left is just nuts. And I'm like, would you be okay to get rid of the whole party and have one-party system? Oh no. And then all those people on the right, they're just nuts. Do you ask the same question? Nobody wants it. Nobody wants one-party system. I'm like, that will make it easy. And also, nobody wants to split the country in half. So I'm like, so that tells me people want to still live with their neighbors and disagree, and everybody have the freedom to do what they want to do. They just don't know how to get through that hump of having those conversations. So because it's like every time I propose the solution, people don't want to.
Well, I think that solution is like a third party.
True.
It's similar in that nobody wants to start a third party. Nobody wants a one party. This is not working. It's a catch-22. I don't really see how this is going to work.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, I think we've talked a little bit about what we can learn from the book, so I don't think we need to go there.
Oh.
But I will ask then, would you recommend this book?
Would I?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. The courage. I'll recommend the book for the one thing and one thing only. Courage. To do the thing you need to do, regardless of what's going on outside. And that's what George Taylor did.
And regardless of what other people think.
Yeah. Because that's what stops people from living their life, living their dream. Is fear of what other people think, what they're going to say. I'm going to get rejected, everything. But at the end of the day, you're going to get to the end of your life. You're going to blame you. You're not going to worry about what other people thinking, saying, and all that stuff. So step up to the plate. We all need to step up to the plate. I would definitely recommend the book for that purpose.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You have been a great guest. I feel like we could continue this conversation for at least another 2 hours. But let's do this again sometime.
Hey, definitely. Whenever you want to do it, let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Erick. Thank you for being on Reading with Rochelle, and I'm looking forward to the next time.
Thanks, Rochelle.